Here's about where I would give you a typical YouTuber video essay intro, but for this video I think we need to immediately address the elephant in the room. The House of the Dead 2 remake is, to put it lightly, bad. Like, really bad. So bad, to the point where it was instantly review bombed on Steam by unhappy fans upon its launch. And it's not like these reviews were a result of the game's creators engaging in unethical practices. In reality, I'm sure they're nice people and I would quite like to invite them over for lunch. Rather, it's an honest reaction from the House of the Dead fanbase regarding the seemingly infinite amount of issues this remake has to offer. I know I usually make videos about fighting game related topics, but as I've been a massive House of the Dead fan since childhood, I feel spiritually obligated to cover this game in a video. Even if you don't know the first thing about light gun shooters, I would recommend sticking around just to see how bewildering this title is for yourself. Trust me, you've probably never seen some of these problems in any game published by a major company before. I should also mention that the developers are committed to patching their game, which is good, but to be honest, it shouldn't have released this broken in the first place, so I'll be discussing the launch version as a result. Put simply, our goal for today is to explore the circumstances surrounding the remake and figure out why seemingly nobody likes it. Sit down and grab a snack, dear viewer, because we've got one hell of a confusing mess to get through. This is the House of the Dead 2 remake.
Dogs of the A.M.S. Time they made a move.
Before we dive into what makes the remake so lackluster, I feel it necessary to provide context for the poor souls who clicked on this video and have no idea what a House of the Dead is, so here we go. First released in 1998, The House of the Dead 2 is the beloved classic sequel to the acclaimed original House of the Dead, and it aimed to expand on its older brother in all fronts. More levels, more zombies, more violence, and more horrible voice acting were the result of development studio Sega A.M.S tackling this assignment with all they had, and the studio nailed it. Even though the core gameplay of aiming, shooting, and reloading is so simple that even a brainless mutant with chainsaw arms could understand it, there's a surprising amount of strategy to be found here, and this naturally intuitive gameplay loop captivated audiences around the world. There are no extra weapons, power-ups, grenades, cover mechanics, etc., so you can only rely on your gun and your wits in this world gone mad. In terms of narrative, an evil man named Goldman is responsible for the havoc, with special agents James Taylor and Gary Stewart being sent out by the A.M.S, a fictional agency to prevent Goldman from destroying the world. Side characters appear along the way to assist our heroes, but the story isn't the primary focus of the game if we're being honest. As arcade games have always been designed to instantly attract and entertain players, story sequences in House of the Dead 2 are brief and to the point, promoting action and intensity over a slow-paced narrative. This makes perfect sense, as no one wants to wait around in an arcade, and luckily for us, the action is really good. The entire game possesses a very gritty and grungy atmosphere that plagues its 6 stages, helping to immerse players in its gothic depiction of Venice, Italy. Detailed dismemberment effects and dynamic lighting serve to maximize the title's fun factor, and these are quite impressive to see in an arcade game that's over 25 years old. Bones shatter and eyes literally pop in response to where you shoot, taking place entirely in real time. Instead of cheaply ragdolling to the ground when executed, mutants of all shapes and sizes collapse in ways that display real visual impact, and if it sounds like I'm giving the game too much credit, I really don't think I am. Sure, I totally understand that this arcade game is the furthest thing from a high-budget modern zombie game, especially with its dreadful voice acting, but when you judge The House of the Dead 2 by the standards that accompanied its initial release in 1998, it holds up splendidly well. Thankfully, it's easier than ever to experience the game on a variety of platforms, and if you have an old Wii or Wii U lying around, I can't recommend The House of the Dead 2 and 3 Return enough. It's also very easy to play this version on PC if you know how, but I don't want Nintendo's lawyers massacring my entire bloodline, so I won't go into too much detail. Now, let's fast forward from 1998 to 2019. Get this, I'm sitting in class during 10th grade, and after scrolling through Reddit to pass the time, don't judge me, I see a post from someone reporting that Polish development studio Forever Entertainment partnered with Sega to continue the series in the form of remakes of the first 2 titles. Woohoo! I think to myself. Sega finally remembers that these classic games exist, so it'll be fantastic to have modern recreations on newer hardware. This is going to be so good, I can't wait for more info. Forever's website claims that more information would come throughout 2020, and at that point, younger me was more than happy to wait. So, this year ended up being the prolapsed anus of the Gregorian calendar, didn't it? And to make matters worse, no new information was released outside of, yeah, we're still working on it. Okay, we've made it to the big leagues. A new website and Twitter account went live, and the game was finally shown off during a Nintendo Indie World Direct in April. Can't wait to play it in this year, right? We've finally made it to 2022, and at this point, life has changed. In between the first remake's announcement and release, I graduated high school and made it into university, so when the remake finally came out, I bought it instantly. Only to be let down by poor performance, lengthy loading times, uninspired sound design, sloppy controls, and a total lack of charm. But all of that is okay, my inner voice told me. You just need to trust the developers, they'll improve over time. With this mind state now controlling my consciousness, I patiently began waiting for more details about the second game's remake. 2023 comes and nothing is announced. 2024 comes and nothing is announced. 2025 comes and not only do we get a trailer, but a demo. That's right, a playable portion of this remake is finally available for public consumption after a 6-year wait. After making it through high school, a global pandemic, my first few years of university, and a breakup, I was finally able to play the first level of this darn game. After all this time, the developers surely learned from the mistakes made on the first game, right? Surely they cracked the code about why the series is so good. Surely it's going to be amazing. They didn't. Let's begin with the remake's gameplay. In typical light gun shooter fashion, you aim, shoot, and reload. Enemies take more damage depending on where you shoot, with the trick being to go for the head. It's also highly important to never run out of ammo at a bad time, as if you constantly fire with reckless abandon, you'll eventually find yourself in a bad situation with no ammo, so be careful. Knowing when to fire and when to refrain is what separates the new players from the experts, so there's quite a bit of timing-based strategy here. When it is time to shoot, you'll find that mutants come in all shapes and sizes, with differing health values, movement patterns, and defensive techniques, so it's not like you can finish the whole game via mindless aggression. Every enemy in the original game is wonderfully unique in both aesthetic and gameplay purposes, helping to set the series apart from some of its contemporaries, and I could go on and on and on about how there's more than meets the eye to House of the Dead's gameplay loop, but you get the idea by now. What's important is how this formula applies to the remake, and it's not great. For starters, the game doesn't have native light gun support, so even if you're dying to use one, you're out of luck. This means that you'll have to use a mouse or a controller, so I went with the former. Although some players hate the idea of using a mouse to play light gun shooters, I've always welcomed it. Not everyone can spend hundreds of dollars on light guns after all, so being able to use readily available technology to experience PC light gun games helps to keep the genre's fanbase alive. With that being said, I really didn't like using it here. Even after messing with the mouse's sensitivity in the options menu, your shots never feel accurate because the cursor is never quite where you want it to be. Combine this with wonky hit detection and you're in for a frustrating time. Sometimes you'll be able to shoot nowhere near the enemy's weak point yet still land a hit. And other times you'll shoot with deadly precision yet somehow miss. It all feels very inconsistent, leading to many cheap hits when you should have avoided taking damage. Enemies also have questionable health values, and this is something I noticed during my very first playthrough. By making your way through the original game, you'll subconsciously make note of how different enemy types have unique amounts of life, and this encourages players to figure out the fastest way of dispatching them. An egregious example I noticed involves the chest burster enemies found in the penultimate level. Normally, shooting them in the head will insta-kill them, but if you don't do this, an animation will play that leads to a parasite bursting through its chest to latch onto you. In the remake, shooting the enemy's head will sometimes trigger the animation, but sometimes it doesn't. This removes all strategy associated with this enemy and it makes it feel more dependent on luck than skill. Also, mutants will sometimes have way more health than they did in the original, leading to even the most basic of threats feeling like boss fights. You have to keep pumping them full of lead, and this sucks when there are groups of enemies. The whole point of these encounters in the original is to force players to use their reactions to quickly determine which enemies to take out first, but since every enemy in the remake has the capacity to magically turn into bullet sponges out of nowhere, this isn't applicable. I thought I was reading into this way too much at first, but then I found Steam reviews echoing these exact sentiments, so I know I'm not crazy. This all may sound pretty bad, but the boss fights really take the cake. Every single one of them has been butchered, and you don't even need to finish the first level to see what I mean. Normally, you're supposed to shoot Qual to do small damage over time and then go for Zeal when he flies above Qual. This basic strategy is found in the remake, but Zeal will sometimes instantly descend off screen, forcing you to take damage when it was never normally like this. If you make it past this phase, Zeal begins to fly at you, but there are times where he moves much faster than intended, with the game's camera often struggling to keep up with him. Again, this was never how it was supposed to be, and this is only the first level. Hierophant's weak spot during his jumping strike is now always on screen as opposed to sometimes being on screen, removing all challenge. Towers' heads can be shot anywhere to do damage, not just when their mouths are open. Strength's head is larger to ensure an easier fight. Magician stays in frame when he teleports, completely ruining his sense of speed found in the original, and Emperor is borderline transparent with his pronounced weak spot being made nearly impossible to see when he's in front of the skybox. Instead of ensuring that the original boss fights were kept the same, the developers went in and made unnecessary changes, dampening the satisfaction you get from defeating them. Finally, every single shot you fire in the remake has the same amount of impact as a light slap on the shoulder by your 2-year-old niece, and there are two reasons as to why that I've thought of. The first concerns audio, as even though the player is supposed to be given the illusion of using a dangerous firearm, there are no convincing sound effects that sell that suspension of disbelief.
No! Don't kill me!
You know it's rough when a 25-year-old game with limited audio memory has more intense sound design than a modern title.
Don't kill me! No! Help me! Help me!
The second reason involves animation and gore effects. Notice how much blood and dismemberment there is in the classic game? This isn't just for show, as you can strategically disable enemies by taking off their limbs. Thankfully, this applies to the remake in theory, but due to the aforementioned health issues, you'll rarely get to use it in ways that feel meaningful. Upon defeat, enemies will also cheaply ragdoll their way to the floor instead of dramatically falling over, which just feels sterile and lifeless. I'm reminded of when Valve decided to incorporate professional motion capture into Left 4 Dead 2 zombie death animations to provide a tangible payoff to the player's actions, and as the House of the Dead is also a game that heavily involves first-person shooting, the shooting has to feel impactful. If it doesn't, you're dead on arrival, because at this point, the player will be reminded that they're pointing and clicking on a screen instead of saving the world from genetic experiments gone horribly wrong, and this is exactly what the remake feels like to play. In the time since I last played the first title's remake, I had totally forgotten about all of the presentation sins that the developers committed, and diving into this game brought them all to the forefront of my mind. Before we even get into the first level, we have to make our way through several menus, and as someone who has been learning about UI and UX at university, the remake's offerings in these departments blew me away, and not in a nice way where you're like, wow, this menu is so cool, there's so much character. Right away, there's a bit of information overload with how many colors, fonts, and menu options there are, but I've thought of how to potentially improve it. The main problem I have with this menu is how there are 3 pages that all contain mostly similar information, and I think it would be nicer if it was all condensed into one menu. All the developers will need to do is have the boss and trading modes below the campaign text, so it's quite an easy fix, and I even made a mock-up at 2 AM to demonstrate what this could theoretically look like. When it's time to jump in, we find this screen with 2 columns containing relevant gameplay information, but for some reason you can't use the mouse to choose between the options. We're forced to use the O and E keys for this, and I hope you remember these, because the game uses them a lot. This next point is a small thing, but it slightly bugs me how these columns aren't centered. They just need to be moved over a bit. After the settings are to your liking, there's a handy level select screen, and this also isn't perfect. Having the game's levels be displayed via an interactive map is quite clever, especially due to the branching pathways being highlighted on a piece of paper. There's nothing wrong here concerning interactivity, but the font placement and text roll off, and I think I know why. As the House of the Dead 2 remake was developed by the Polish Megapixel studio, a subsidiary of the aforementioned Forever Entertainment, a vast majority of the game's text hasn't been translated properly into English. This may seem like a nitpick, but I'm pretty sure that 3rd graders are punished for writing sentences like these, especially when they misspell one of the main characters' surnames. There are also frequent typos that any decent proofreader would have caught during development, so I can't figure out how it all went so wrong. My best guess would be a botched translation job, but when you have 9 people credited under quality assurance and 2 under language QA, these should have been fixed. Seriously, what is going on here? A few of the awkwardly written loading screen tips, if you can even call them tips, have also been directly lifted from the first remake, hinting that the developers copy and pasted pre-existing assets without checking first for any issues. Going back to the actual game now, the UI is much better, but I still think improvements can be made. The weapon display and blood spider are good, with the splatter's color letting us know which player we're watching as well as matching the game's horror theme. As a result, I don't think you have to have the P1 text, the red gives it away. The only problem I have here is the score font, as we see it be used all over the game from beginning to end. It's trying to imitate how it looked in the original game, but I find it to look a bit cheap when in HD. It's similar to the fonts you would find on Google by searching for spooky font, but as it's paying homage to the original game, I can't be too upset. Our next issue involves lighting, and upon hearing that, you might think, hang on, wouldn't this be easy to do? Just copy what everything looks like in the original game and you're good to go. And to that, I would agree. It's just a shame that the developers messed up severely. No, YouTube's video player is not corrupting. This is genuinely what the game looks like in motion. Frequent lighting issues haunt levels, destroying any sense of atmosphere that they used to have, and levels are often way darker than they're supposed to be. You'll quite often run into areas that should be well lit, but aren't in the remake. On the topic of lighting, I can't tell you how many times I saw light sources with no definable origin point. For example, where are the lights in the final level coming from? They don't seem to be attached to anything, so perhaps their objects aren't rendering properly? As the developers couldn't even get the main character's gun to appear normally, this doesn't sound too far-fetched. The cold interiors of buildings and offices are now changed to look considerably warmer, and this change in lighting makes the stages look samey. In fact, the whole game now looks super orange, and if you didn't know any better, I wouldn't blame you for not realizing that these were 2 totally different levels. House of the Dead 2 never used to have bloom, motion blur, film grain, chromatic aberration, etc., and these additions, while commonplace in modern video games, don't serve to bring the characters and environments of House of the Dead to life in the remake. As a result of these additions, there's a noticeable amount of flickering on screen, surface reflections don't feel finished, and it just looks like a bunch of Vaseline has been smeared onto your monitor. Thankfully, these settings can be disabled in the options menu, which I recommend doing. The final component of this section I would like to mention involves audio, more specifically the game's soundtrack. I mentioned earlier how your shots provide no sense of impact, but this also applies to the remixed music. The groovy instrumentation and tension-inducing melodies of the original have been replaced by tracks that end up playing second fiddle, with the magic and soul of the classic music being gone. On a lighter note, you can switch to the original music in the settings, but it just doesn't feel right when combined with the altered visuals and voice acting. And speaking of the voice acting, oh boy, it's like they didn't even try. The best example involves Goldman, and you can only imagine my shock upon discovering he was now from Texas.
Dawn of the A.M.S. Time they made a move.
The civilians also sound absurd, and I don't know if this guy is Polish, Scottish, or a weird mix of both.
My friends went inside, but they're not back yet. I told them not to go.
Interactions between characters are now stilted and lifeless, often sounding borderline AI generated. It's very inconsistent, as although some voice actors seem to have put effort into their line delivery,
Thanks. You can get outside that way.
others are as flat as an ironing board.
1998 Curian case? Guess who was behind it? It was Goldman. He's the head of one of the most eminent financial groups and an expert on the genome theory. We have to stop him.
I'm going to be completely monotone despite being in a zombie outbreak, James. We need to head to Sunset Bridge so I can find my missing personality. At this point, we know that the remake looks, sounds, and plays worse than the original, but there can't be anything left to say, right? Recalling the introductory portion of the video, you might remember me saying that the developers are patching the game, but let's go back to what it looked like on launch. For starters, if you had save data from the demo, you would get a message reading "controller disconnected." Huh, that's weird. From this point on, if you tried to move around the menus, nothing would happen, and there was also no audio. Even if you did somehow make it past this point, your controls would become disabled when attempting to rescue a civilian, so it was literally unplayable. Despite having over triple the development time of the original House of the Dead 2, Megapixel Studios shipped an actual broken product. Thankfully, I didn't have the demo on my new PC, so I was able to avoid these issues, but if I played the remake on my laptop that actually has demo save data, I would have been totally screwed. I read on the Steam forums that the developers quickly patched this bug, which is good, but it just shouldn't have been there in the first place. When I was making my way through the first level, I was pleasantly surprised with the remake's performance. It runs at a solid frame rate, and the level design wasn't too bad, so I had hopes for the following stage. But then, I turned around this corner, and nothing could have prepared me for what I saw next. That's right, the game doesn't load in parts of the map, and it's not a one-off bug or error with my GPU either. This level will fail to load properly every time you play through it. Whether it's a whole building, parts of the ground, distant terrain, or just flat out missing textures, House of the Dead 2 Remake cannot load assets to save its life. I suspect that this is due to faulty texture streaming, but as it's so obvious, I struggle to see how an issue of this caliber made its way into the final game. Surely the developers noticed it during testing. What blows my mind about this is how this is taking place despite the player having zero camera control. Sega figured out when and how to render parts of the map and when to get rid of them for the first Virtua Cop, for goodness sakes, so this can't be very hard for another legitimate game studio to incorporate, especially one with prior experience with like-on games. I've also seen reports of players claiming frequent crashes, and although the remake has been very stable on my PC, I'm not surprised that it's having issues on other people's setups. Loading times also aren't amazing, and even though I'm running the game from an internal SSD, the original loads much faster, and I attribute these extended loading times to Unreal Engine 4. When I was researching the game for this video, I was reminded that it's also coming to older systems like the Switch and the PS4, with the latter being over a decade old at this point. If it's anything like how I remember the Switch version of the first remake being, then you can expect sub 30 FPS gameplay. I've even found reviews online stating that just like the first remake, the Switch's control scheme requires numerous tweaks to become acceptable, not even great, so if you really want to play through these games, I'd recommend picking them up on PC. Aside from that, I didn't run into any other major technical issues, although I believe this is due to my PC specs rather than the game itself being well optimized. After seeing so many people online running into significant issues trying to get this game to just run, I can't honestly claim that you will have smooth performance like I did, so your mileage may vary. Just for transparency's sake, I'm running this game on a brand new gaming PC that I bought like a month ago. It has a lot of RAM and some pretty good specs, so I'm pretty sure that's why the game is running so smoothly. If I tried to run it on my older gaming laptop, I suspect it would have failed considerably. If I had to sum up my experiences with this remake, I would have to say I was very disappointed, yet in the back of my mind I kind of saw this coming. It's ironic to say now, but I don't like to be overtly negative or critical in my videos, because I understand that, look, developers are human, and they often run into overwhelming deadlines and schedule problems, but with how Forever Entertainment specifically has a proven track record, of pumping out cheap remakes of older IPs, I believe that The House of the Dead 2 is yet another of their victims. The game is over a quarter of a century old, yet still has a dedicated fanbase who have mastered its intricacies to an inhuman level, so it really deserved better. If done right, A House of the Dead 2 remake could surpass the original in visuals, audio, gameplay, presentation, performance, etc., but that type of game only exists in a better timeline where arcades never went out of style. In order for the series to thrive in the current era, I think Sega has to ensure that all of its games are playable on modern hardware. Believe it or not, but there is no system past the PS3 that have these games readily available, and with how the HD re-releases of House of the Dead 3 and 4 are digital only, they will eventually become delisted when Sony shuts down the PS3 store. In conclusion, if you ever want to see some old school action, play the original duology. If you want to see the first Lycon shooter to ever run in HD, play the House of the Dead 4. If you ever want to see how the story concludes, play House of the Dead 3. If you want to play an actual Sega-developed modern House of the Dead game, play Scarlet Dawn. And if you want to see what the series can look like when developed in the West, please, for the love of God, play the House of the Dead Overkill. It's so good. In my opinion, if you have a PC or even an Android smartphone capable of emulating Wii-era games, then there's absolutely no reason for you to play the remakes outside of morbid curiosity. The originals look better, feel better, and they have lower hardware requirements. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you and your time, and I hope you had fun, and I hope you learned something about the series. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.